tell us about your role in particular as executive director. What is it that you're overlooking and what are you overseeing?
Well, primarily it's programming. It's also the research agenda that we take on. In particular, I'm very proud of the fact that over the past year, we've taken on the subject of the lack of Asian American leadership representation in higher education. Nationally, for example, there are only 1.5% of university presidents that are Asian American. And so we've looked into the issues around why that is the case, what kinds of things can be done. We've come up with a set of recommendations in terms of developing an infrastructure and a pipeline to have more and more representation of Asian Americans in the higher ranks of education leadership. And by that I mean that we're looking for what would be considered meaningful positions. We have representation in areas which are of importance to higher education, such as vice presidents of facilities, etc., but we're not finding ourselves in positions that matter from the point of view of setting policy for the university, from the point of view of setting the educational agenda for universities, for example, as chief academic officer. So when we're talking about Asian American leadership at higher education levels, we're not simply talking about having executive titles. We're talking about positions that are meaningful, that have an impact.
Mm-hmm. At any point, will it broaden to find out why there's not enough representation in other parts of, let's just say, the government or other parts of different organizations?
What happens in higher education, I think, is very much reflected in all of the other sectors that you mentioned as well. Obviously, there is something going on. Our communities tend to be newer communities in terms of the large influx of people of Asian heritage has really only happened in the past 30, 35 years. When the immigration laws changed in '65 so that the focus moved away from primarily Western Europe, it took about 10 years for the pipeline to fill. And then families began to come over. And as you know, when immigrant families come, their first primary focus really is to establish themselves and to put food on the table and to figure out how to educate their children. So now we're getting people in the pipeline that have the education, the skill set, and so forth, and perhaps the stability in terms of family life to be able to start to pursue these positions. In New York City, for example, about 78% of the Asian American population is foreign born. So that's an indication of the kinds of things we see in these communities. The same would hold true for the Hispanic community. And even the African American Black community, as we have called it, has changed tremendously. In New York City, over 31% of the Black population is foreign born. So given those types of demographics, it does take a while for us to begin to, again, enter the pipeline and to show up at the top of the pipeline. Mm-hmm.